I was definitely weird in that I was really into David Letterman, late night. I loved Howard Stern. There was a call-in radio show on Q101 called Loveline, hosted by Adam Carolla and Dr. Drew. That
Hmm.
was appointment viewing for me every single night from 10 to 12. I was listening to Loveline, and Jimmy Kimmel, especially early on in that time, was a huge influence on me. So those were all kind of my heroes growing up. And then I also kind of want to shout out to Nardwuar. It's impossible to deny his influence and what that means on the show. And I remember in college just binging Nardwuar interviews, just watching one after the other.
There's this amazing meme of him asking J. Cole, "Did you tell Dr. Dre about Kendrick?" And it's just Cole for like 10 minutes, just like looking at everyone in the room, like, dude, nobody. You could just tell like nobody knew that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. I used to always kind of run back those kinds of moments. Like if you see that originally in the J. Cole interview, after you're done watching it, you run it back. Like you want to see that moment again. And I think it's because interviews are by nature kind of like artificial, especially these sorts of entertainment interviews. They are by their own nature,
Mhm.
but those are true and real human moments. You know
Yes.
what I mean? And then when those things shine through in that context, it becomes so special. It's kind of like the bullseye with the question where you kind of set it up with the context and then drop a hammer in a way that kind of pierces them and that they didn't expect, and then they can only react to that in a human way because they're just not expecting that. And then that's kind of special when you get those. But Nardwuar was like the first person who I ever saw who could just like manufacture those kinds of moments, and they'd be in almost every single episode. It's funny that you like brought up TRL because like sometimes I think about a kind of like Carson Daly parallel with me, and like Hot Ones is kind of like my TRL moment, this like sort of breakthrough shooting star in the constellation of pop culture that kind of came out of nowhere. But then he like went from TRL to like that show at 1 o'clock in the morning. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he went from that sort of big,
Yes.
huge thing to then cable middle of the night.
Yeah, and it was amazing too to see Carson Daly in those two. Like I was never going to be on TRL, but I was on the late night one, and his questions, like
Yeah.
that's when I was in a heavy activist phase, and he asked me, "How do you be an activist and an artist and not have your activism become a performance?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, Carson Daly, like that's a really like man, that's an amazing question." You know what I mean?
Yeah, but then the other thing that I think is like amazing about his career, and the other thing that I admire is that he was able to age with his audience. It's like
Mm,
he didn't have to like be young and TRL-ish forever.
yes,
He could kind
yeah.
of naturally go from like the kids that were watching TRL in junior high and high school. He could go to this like middle of the night kind of like college dorm setting, like more grown up talk show. He's on the Today Show now. You know what I mean? So it's like he's aged like completely through with his audience in like such a dignified and smooth way. And I don't think enough people talk about it. So sometimes, like, if my agent asks me, like, oh, like, how do you see it, or like, how do you envision it, or how do you want it? Like, I always think about Carson Daly. And then, like, yeah, pivoting to then what is sort of like the late night, sort of like smaller audience, like fewer expectations interview show that's next. I wouldn't have some sort of expectation for it that like, oh, the next thing's got to be bigger and crazier and better than Hot Ones. Like, I definitely don't want to be in that mindset. I'm just like following the star of Carson with that one.